My guest today on the Ryerson Negotiation Project is Dr. Ann Golden, former President and CEO of the Conference Board of Canada. Dr. Golden is also the former President of the United Way of Greater Toronto, the recipient of the Order of Canada, the Order of Ontario, 6 honorary doctorates, and currently our guest is a distinguished visiting scholar and special advisor at Ryerson University. Welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, David.
Well, Ann, Conference Board of Canada, a great success under your tenure. You've had to deal with many, many multi-stakeholders. Could you share with us as to how a president of such a formidable organization as the Conference Board, how you would deal with these multi-different stakeholders?
I guess just the way I would deal with anybody and everybody. At the Conference Board, one of the challenges was to keep different stakeholders happy in a complex project. For example, we started a project on food. So you have the interests of the processors, the producers, the consumers, the government, and there are they have some of their interests aligned, but some don't. And as in any negotiation, you listen, you try to understand what's at stake for each individual group, and sometimes there's divisions, by the way, within the groups, and you try as much as is reasonable to meet their needs. There's tons of consultation. I do believe in transparency, so letting people see drafts before they're put out, no surprises, winning their confidence, and really also getting them to believe in what will be the ultimate product. They really have to care about what's coming out of it, and so they're motivated to overcome any differences and to try to find common ground.
When you talk of when we talk of multi-stakeholders, we talk about their individual interests. Would you have to spend a lot of time in terms of trying to ascertain what their interests were as opposed to what their position might have been?
It very much depends on the project. We were running a major project on health. People come at it from all different directions. So professionals come at it, the hospitals come at it, the local community groups. Everybody has a different point of view. I remember when I did the homelessness task force, and just a multitude of stakeholders. We spent tons of time reading, listening, going to consult, trying to get educated. And when there was a disagreement, spending time with the people. And sometimes we would say, look, can we agree to disagree on this? If it became impossible, then on that particular issue we would say, let's study this further to find a way out of it. In other words, if we couldn't get common ground where we needed to, if we didn't need to, we didn't. Sometimes we acknowledged that there were 2 or 3 different points of view on a particular issue. I think basically the rules would be the same for anything. Educating yourself, listening, trying to understand where other people are coming from, seeing where you can find common ground, and just sometimes you can't. If you can't, that's not going to work. You have to recognize sometimes it's not always going to work. Not every negotiation is going to be successful.
Tell me about your listening skills.
I had to improve them. I think I was, in terms of my own personality, I was actually, I'm married to somebody who thinks things through more slowly. I'm very quick, sort of like the book Blink. And when the book Blink, Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, finally came out and said that it was not only okay but often good to go with your intuition. But I am an intuitive person rather than a reflective person. But when you're running an organization, say like United Way, there are so many different stakeholders. You really have to hone your listening skills, because people, above all, have to be respected. I'll give you an example. I used to double task. Sometimes I'd be talking to somebody and then doing something else. It was pointed out to me that this isn't good. People don't feel respected. If you're, to use today's language, we didn't have it then when I was at United Way, but if you're, I don't know if you've had experience, people talking to you while they're doing their BlackBerry, this is not good for listening. Even if you can multitask, it doesn't convey that you're listening. So I received some mentoring on that, and then I really did learn, and I do, as much as I possibly can, pay attention to the listening
It really is a skill,
very much.
and one has to practice it continuously. I'm glad you pointed out for some of our younger viewers that are watching the program the importance of speaking and listening and then being on your BlackBerry. Even though you can multitask, it's still sending a signal.
It is, and you know, some people are impatient, some people are patient. I don't think being impatient is bad. I think sometimes being impatient is great because it can make you more productive. It makes you very task-oriented. Often some of our highest achievers are impatient. But if you're trying to negotiate and seek an arrangement with someone else where their cooperation is absolutely essential, you have to learn to, still being impatient, that is, you want to see your result, but you have to make them feel respected in the process, and the biggest part of that is listening, and that means genuine listening. There are people who listen, feign listening, and then don't close the loop. One of my rules in life is you close the loop. Someone says something to you, I really think you should be doing it this way, you read it or you study it and it's not coming out, pick up the phone or go and visit or send a message. I thought about what you said, but since that time I've learned A, B, and C, and I think I'm going to go in this direction. Please call me if you have any problems. Closing the loop on a discussion is very important.
You said you were mentored in terms of your listening
I
skills.
was one of the members of the board of United Way. When I was seeking the position, I had been a vice president there. They said, you know, we think you're strong in A, B, C, but we noticed that you're somewhat impatient, and I wanted to talk to you about your listening skills. And that's another big thing, is in negotiation. You can't be defensive. No one is perfect. So if someone says to you, I want to give you some advice, like in my case, listening skills, you have to actually want to hear it. Now, not all feedback is fun.
No, it's not.
But they say feedback is a gift. I had someone who worked for me who used to give me feedback every day, and I turned to him and I said, you know, feedback is very, very good, but it's not a continuous gift. But you make time, and you actually have to be genuine in wanting the feedback. I don't think there's anybody that's perfect at everything. So if you're really constantly trying to improve because you want the organization or the job you're doing to be successful, you just have to not be defensive.
Very good. Let's go back to 1999, taking responsibility for the homelessness. A very comprehensive study that you chaired in the great city here of Toronto. You made a number of recommendations. I'm wondering if you could share with the viewers in terms of how you actually negotiated those concerns around those different recommendations, because I'm sure some of them were not always unanimous. And how did it work?
Maybe 2 points. First of all, there were two levels of the negotiation. In producing the report and doing the report and coming up with the recommendations, negotiation was involved just to ensure that the various stakeholders felt that they had been listened to, how we organized the report. So we used all kinds of methodologies to engage people. We did tours, so we visited, for example, virtually all the shelters, spoke with people on the health side of homelessness, on the mental health side of homelessness, on the people providing homes and housing for homeless people, on the hospital side. So we tried to make sure that all of the different, and we spent time thinking through who were the different groups, met with them, talked with them about the kinds of recommendations, and then through that piece kept negotiating. On a more complicated one was the report I did on the Greater Toronto Area. And there you had all the 30-plus municipalities and the mayors, each with different points of view, and just all the different sectors, from labor to private sector, public sector, all the institutions. There we had elaborate means of, at that time we put out a fax news report every week. We didn't want to go the full inquiry route with having people present because we didn't have time. The government had changed. Premier Ray was replaced by Premier Harris, who shortened the time frame from a year and a half to 4 months, so we didn't have time to do hearings. But we did send out a weekly newsletter updating people and inviting people to react on a continuing basis. So part of the negotiation, getting to where we wanted to in terms of what would the recommendations be, was engaging, and allowing for feedback and getting back to people. So then after that, after we had the report, there was a lot of negotiation, in particular with the different levels of government. And there were lots of issues. Went many times to Ottawa, trying to get the municipalities, and there were over 30, the province together with the feds. And be honest with you, sometimes sitting in those meetings, multi-level, the issues were petty. Different ministers, for example, felt insulted. And if they felt insulted, it became very personal and not about the issues. So sometimes my negotiation skills were about cajoling or trying to overcome things with a bit of humor, trying to refocus. Sometimes it was, I remember visiting CMHC to say that I would like to speak with the minister at that time, Minister Galliano. And I had already arranged to meet with Minister Galliano, and they said, CMHC at that time was out of the housing business, as you well know. And they said, well, you cannot meet with the minister. And I said, actually, I have a meeting after you with the minister. Well, that can't be. I said, actually, but I do. So they went to check on it, and they said that suddenly the tone changed. Well, can we come with you to the meeting with the minister? And again, because I believe in transparency, I said, sure. But I didn't always have to work through the exact same channels, because I knew what the answer here would be. So I used my own channel. And then, but again, open, nothing hidden.
How did you come to an agreement on the task force with regards to the recommendations? I understand that you met with all of the stakeholders, but then you came with a series of recommendations. How would you negotiate that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, and I think I have a useful tip here. I had 4 brilliant task force members that I had invited. We had Rob Pritchard, president of the university, Jack Diamond, who's world-class architect, Dr. Joseph Wong, a community physician, and I had Tom McCormick, an economist. And I knew from having done other projects that you have to know where you're going or you won't get there. You know the Alice in Wonderland, any road will take you there as long as you don't know where you're going. So I knew even before we did our work that we had to know where we were going. And I had seen this done before. So I asked these very busy and talented and brilliant people if they would come away for the weekend to we were watching the budget, so at a cheap motel in Oshawa to show we were region-minded, and because symbols matter too. And I said, would you give up a weekend? And here's Jack working at that time in Israel. I think it was on the City Hall, flying back on the midnight plane so he can be there in the morning and work all day Sunday. Anyway, they all agree. Actually, to give you a sense of the spirit of it, I remember Rob Pritchard saying, I'm so busy, the only time I have with my wife is the weekends. This is an impossible demand, but because I believe in this project, I am saying yes. And we all went, and at the end of that exercise, I asked each of them to go into a room for an hour and write the outline of the report. Not what the recommendations would be, but the outline. And we all came back in the room and shared our outline. And we were off just by 1 chapter.
Really?
So, yes, and so the only negotiation in deciding what the report would cover was whether or not we would cover land use and transportation planning as part of the issue of governance. And we agreed to, and we decided to, and of course it's so critical. Look at the issues we're dealing with now in Toronto. It's about governance and it's about land use and transportation planning. Those are the key issues.
Now that model that you've used
Yes.
for this particular report in terms of the United Way, have you used it since, or would you?
That was for the province. That was for the task force on Greater Toronto. Yes, I've used that a few times. It doesn't always work. It works where there's a high level of trust between the people, so that we knew that we were all going, we knew we wanted this to be a success. It was very high profile. We had spent a lot of time, when I asked people to join the task force, I didn't just pick up the phone and said, will you join? We met. I knew what their goals were, where they were coming from, why they said yes. So I was pretty confident that in terms of our passion for the task and in terms of our commitment to improving the GTA region, the Greater Toronto region, that was all there. The only debate was going to be intellectual in terms of the actual content of the report. And since we were all on the same page, I guess you could say, from an emotional point of view, the intellectual part, and there was tremendous respect for everybody else in the room. I would say there was a five-way mutual respect. And so it just worked obviously extremely well. We did accomplish it, and not everything was implemented, but I think they're still discussing some of the issues we presented, so I feel good about it. Yeah.
Let me take you back to the conference board in terms of the multi-stakeholders that you had to deal with. Share with us in terms of how you developed and received your mandate.
Well, the mandate, if you're a CEO, comes from one place only, and that is the board. And you have to respect that. In fact, the board really has, I think, two important jobs: to hire the CEO and to define the mandate. After that, they can monitor and advise and be constructive. They can point out risk. But by and large, by defining the mandate, modifying the mandate as you go along, and working with the CEO, that's their job. So,
were you a part of the developing of that mandate?
When I was hired for the conference board, it was a mandate to change. Not everybody gets a mandate to change. My successor has not been given the same mandate for change, but more a mandate to, I guess, for continuity and for tweaking and growing, but not for dramatic change. Everything about the conference board at that point, they want to change. We had to change the business model. It was a membership organization, but at that, everybody could see at that point in time that people are not going to support a think tank, or the institutions won't support a think tank just out of loyalty. In philanthropy, as in sponsorship, everything was becoming much more what's in it for me. That's been the case since 1985, David. And that's very important to understand when you're negotiating. Everybody is looking at the bottom line in terms of what do they gain or not from it, what are the risks to them.
So share with us a little bit about how you maneuvered the model at the conference board.
It's a good.
It was membership driven at one time.
Right. So how did I do that? I hired a very good marketing director, and what we talked with the team. I do a lot of consultation with the senior team. I'm proud of the senior teams I've been able to recruit and develop. And we talked about alternative business models, and the one we felt would be most successful in the long term, as did the board, was that in a sense it was a model that you had to, I don't know how to say it, but in the vernacular it's you kill what you eat every year. You have to earn every year your revenue. Conference Board's the biggest think tank in Canada, 200 full-time staff and 150 on contract that we have to support. So this is not, it's a $35 million budget, so it's I would say it's larger than the next largest think tank by a factor of, 7 times, so it's big. So we had to go to institutions, say like the banks, and say, look, right now you're giving us X. We want to convert you to a purchase model, but we have to give you the equivalent or more. And we met with so I went to the people I knew, because I think relationships are key, and I explained what we had to do. And I said, right now you're giving us X amount. We want to give you this, and we want to increase what you're giving. As it turned out, this bank CEO was fantastic, I won't name him, generous, and cared about public policy. So he said, I'm going to double what I was giving you, and I'm happy to buy this package of goods.
So you provided a list of services.
That was greater than what he was getting. In other words, we had to point out, we had to make it better, more worthwhile. We had to make it worthwhile for him to switch.
So you gave on the intellectual side, and
gave
then
on the content side and on the product side. Mm-hmm.
And you received compensation for that.
Right.
And that's worked quite well.
And in the first year, we converted all of the memberships, and within a year and a half, we were ahead of where we were.
What sort of member services would you have to provide under the new regime?
Well, we always did research and analysis, so there'd be research reports. So if I take the example of the bank, economic forecasting, globally, nationally, by municipality, by sector. Now, what we continued to do during my time there was enrich each of these. So for example, we didn't used to do sector forecasts. When I left, I think we were doing 15 different sector forecasts 4 times a year. So we increased the product, but at the same time, and another thing we would do is we have events. symposia and this stuff. But a lot of this has changed over the years because the technology advanced so much that the way we provided information wasn't as needed at the end of my 11-year term as at the beginning, because people were getting forecasts online, whereas they used to come to mini conferences to get, mini forums to get it on, 4 times a year when we would run these across the country. Still run them, but the emphasis has changed. So we made huge changes in technology in terms of what was available. So there would be research, there would be events, conferences, courses, leadership courses like at Niagara. Really about 5 or 6 different types of businesses that they could participate in.
So generate revenue for that.
Yeah. And each product had its own price.
Okay. In your career, whether it's at the conference board or doing various studies across the country or teaching, you've obviously come in contact with difficult people. How do you negotiate with difficult people? Share with us the way to do it or not to do it.
Sometimes you're not successful. I'll tell you a story, but I use humor a lot. I try to, in the meeting, not to be just, hi, I'm here to get this. I actually, and this is important, I think, that I learned, especially in fundraising. Because in fundraising, you're calling on someone to do something that they don't want to do and to give, and to do it bigger than they had intended. I mean, and you're trying to win them over. So you have to be genuinely interested in them. Same thing at the conference board. When I was going to ask a company to invest in a product, I had to understand and wanted to know their issues. So I decided at the outset that I was going to use this whole job as a learning experience. So the first thing I do is I take the time to find out what is on their mind, what is of concern for them. Very often I find there's something we can help them with at the conference board, like a contract research or something like that. So I think that's the first thing, is you have to be interested in the person as a person. It just can't be
all business.
All business. Relationships really matter.
I want to come to relationships in a moment, but continue.
But sometimes you have to use humor, and then sometimes, I will tell you a story. This was the most bizarre encounter I've ever had in, I guess, the last 20, 25 years of calling on CEOs. I was at United Way. The chairman of the campaign was a wonderful man named Bob Martin, now deceased. Very principled, very caring, top integrity. We go to call on a CEO who will remain nameless. We present the case. We think we do a good job. And the CEO tells us that he's not going to give us any money because he doesn't believe in helping people. He's very tough-minded. For example, and as an example of how tough-minded he is, he tells us about the guy that he fired that day, who he knows his mother has cancer, and he knows that he's sick, and he knows that the finances of the family are in a disastrous state, and he proceeds to tell us with some pride about how cruel he is with this person. My chair, my volunteer chair, Bob Martin, couldn't take it anymore. Got up and he says, "I'm out of here." He said, "I cannot listen to this. You are a mean SOB." He leaves the room, but I had, you always do your homework on any call, I should mention that. I had learned that this chap had studied history. I'm an historian by training. So before I left, I said, you studied history, didn't you, at whatever university? He said, "Yes, I did." I said, "I'm an historian." I said, what history did you study?" I found out what he had studied. I said, "Look," I said, "one historian to another, would you give me $10,000 and I'll leave?" Took out his checkbook, gave me a check for $10,000, and I walked out. That doesn't work all the time.
Obviously not.
No. But I do try to find a link with the person. And actually, Bob did ask me, "How could you even take the money?" I said, because I knew it wasn't for me, and it was for people who needed it, and he agreed. But that was, sometimes you're with people that are not always delightful. And sometimes you just can't take it. Like Bob just couldn't listen to it, and I respect that. And you don't always win in a negotiation. There are times when it didn't work, and I would say thank you for your time, and I would leave.